for attending this press conference. I saw a letter from former President Granger, and it was sent to the editor or the editors of the newspapers. And it's titled, "Former President Granger Corrects Misinformation from Minister Manikchand." Now, I do not want to be unkind to President Granger. He served our country for 5 years, and we must respect that. But clearly, from the tone of his letter and the content of the letter, I believe that somehow when he processes his tenure, he has a very different view of its success than when we process the measures that he implemented in the 5 years that he was president. And so clearly there may be a misunderstanding of how we process things. And I want to, in a respectful way, address this letter and also many of his policies that were put in place under the APNU AFC government. So President Granger was upset that Priya Manikchand said that the 5B program that he implemented failed and that it robbed the children of Guyana the money that they were getting. So why did Priya Manikchand say this? And she's not the only person who have said this. I've said this several times on the campaign trail in 2020, and I've repeated this assertion. So in 2014, there were 167,000 children in public schools who were receiving a $10,000 grant. If you multiply 167,000 by 10,000, it gives you 1.67 billion per year they were receiving. The PNC, AFC, and APNU, when they took office, they discontinued this grant, claiming they could not afford it. So in 5 years, if you calculate 1.6 billion times 5, that's 8 billion that the children would have received had they not discontinued the grant, $8 billion. Instead, he replaced this with the 5Bs program. The 5Bs program, you had about 35 buses, reconditioned buses, donated to the government that he distributed some bicycles and a few buses, boats. And then in this letter seeks to justify that somehow this was a fair replacement of the grant that his government took away from the children. With $8 billion, imagine you could have bought over 1,000 buses. But he doesn't see it this way. And in his government, the reason that they used for taking this away from the children is they could not afford it. It was too costly. But in the same government, they were spending over $1.6 billion per year more on dietary in government, buying food in for the government. So clearly his government made a choice to spend the money on food for government officials rather than giving it to the children. So when Priya Manikchand says, you basically, I've even gone further, they stole it from the parents and the children. The money was spent, but it was spent elsewhere. And what did we promise? We promised to restore it and to increase it to $50,000. So if you take just the 50,000, leave out the 5,000 that we've increased, also the clothing allowance, because it was $2,500, I think we've doubled it. $2,000 and now it's $5,000. Take that aside. If you look at the 200,000 kids who are in public school and private schools now, and you multiply by 50,000, that's $10 billion per year they're getting under a PPP government that was reduced to zero under his government. It was $1.6 billion when we left office, and then his government took it away from the children, that's per year, and now this year it has gone back to $10 billion per year for the children and their parents. That's why they're going to get it. That's the difference. In a respectful way, I want him to consider that his government did not see the children's grant as a priority. And look at some of the things they spent money on in that period. They spent money on rentals increase by $1 billion. Vehicles maintenance maybe nearly by $1.5 billion. I can go down the long list of where money was spent because the budget grew massively. They collected $94 billion more per year in taxes by increasing taxes, but it didn't go to the children. They claim they couldn't afford that. So that is why Priya Manikchand can proudly say today that his 5B's program catered for a few people, maybe few persons got these buses. But 35 buses donated can't replace the $1.6 billion that per year that you took away from the children. So I hope that he now in his quiet moments would reflect upon this and would understand why people were so aggrieved by this policy. And then he would, if he were to do this fairly, then he would see how committed we are to the children. Because now their parents would get $10 billion per year. The second thing is he would recall that he promised on the campaign trail in 2015 to engage young people and to have many jobs created. What happened in reality? Young people were excluded from his government, and they were also, when it came to jobs, he said in a public statement that's famous now, he said that's not the government's responsibility. You can do pepper sauce, I think it was, or something like that, or plantain chips. You recall that video of him saying this. First of all, it's not the government's responsibility to create jobs. Moving from the campaign where he boldly asserted that my government will find jobs for young people, to no responsibility for creating jobs. So he could, in the quiet reflection now, he would may realize why people were so upset with him. And then he campaigned also on a promise of lower taxes, both AFC and APNU, and then they increased a whole slew of taxes. They campaigned on not closing, expanding sugar, and then closing several estates and sending home 7,000 people. He campaigned among the miners vigorously that he will assist them in numerous areas, and then increased a whole slew of taxes on the miners. So I hope that he would look at it from the perspective of the populace, because sometimes people live in these cocoons and they think they did extremely well because they're surrounded by people who tell them this often. They don't go out on the ground like we do, like President Ali does almost every day. And he gets feedback directly from people on the ground where they can criticize you. Like we go to community meetings and we get this all the time. You get an unfiltered feedback. But in his case, he was so aloof, surrounded by a government that was itself aloof. He probably never got a feedback, and they told him, you did a great job. The fact of the matter is that we declined in every area, in every single area. They made a mess of everything, including the oil and gas negotiations. And if you listen to them today, you would think they signed a great deal, the 2016 PSA, because they have a way of revising history. And so his letter to the newspaper complaining that Priya Manikchand was unfair to him and that we are campaigning now, that is why we're distorting facts. It's not that we're distorting facts. We made promises to the people of the country. They are outlined in our manifesto. We kept our promises. We kept our promise to the children of Guyana. You did not, President Gray. He did not. And so this is something that I wanted to draw attention to, because somehow if you listen to the opposition, when they speak, they think they did a great job in the 5 years that they were there. But when you actually measure the success using objective criteria and metrics, you find that it was a disastrous period, a disastrous tenure in government. But they live off the anecdotes and the self-praise because they were in these tiny bubbles. And therefore, they campaign with the greatest confidence about the great tenure that they did when people were just losing welfare and they were losing everything else. You would believe that they took away the free water from the pensioners because they love the pensioners. They would actually try to spin a story like that they had to take away the water subsidy from the pensioners or the electricity subsidy that was there in 2015 for the pensioners because they love the pensioners. And they had to increase taxes because on the productive sectors, because it was for the good of the productive sector. So when you buy equipment, you had to end up paying VAT, which wasn't there before, because that was the right thing to do for the productive sector. Of course, the people in the productive sectors of the economy didn't see it the same way. And that led to the shrinkage of output, economic output. So bubble and causes them to be very arrogant about their tenure in office. That is why they've never taken responsibility for the disastrous 28 years and then the 5 years and the lack of achievement. And so I wanted just to, using this letter, to make that point. And it's not I'm a political person, but it's not a political point. I'm just urging him in his the spare time now that he has, and he has a lot of it, to think back to all of the promises. Read back your own manifesto. Just read your manifesto of 2015 and then look at what happened in 2020. Here is a person who campaigned on accountability and that he restored local democracy to Guyana. You remember that? And tried to steal elections. They tried to steal elections in 2020. Campaign on decency and constitutionality, and had the most breaches of our constitution for any president in the history of Guyana. And I'm not speaking about minor breaches. I'm speaking about egregious breaches of the Constitution, like the unilateral appointment of the chairman of GCOM, moving away not from a clear constitutional provision, but from also 25 years of practice and common understanding between all the political parties in the country. He did that. And he also then violated a clear provision of the Constitution, kept his government in place almost a year after it should have held elections and demitted office by reinterpreting the clear provision that says if a government falls in a no-confidence motion, you have to hold elections within 3 months. Those are serious breaches of the Constitution. So I hope that he spends some time on this. This week I also want to address this. I see it's a letter, I think in Starbuck News or maybe something, from Anand Gulsarand. Now, you know I've been very critical of Anand Gulsarand for his complicity with the APNU government in many issues in the past. But today I'm not going to dwell on those issues. I want to today deal with this differently. In the same tone as asking for reflection from former President Granger, I want to do the same with Anand Gulsarand. So his article is it not time for us to embrace a system of shared governance? And now, this issue has an uncanny way of surfacing just around elections and only when the People's Progressive Party is in power, about shared governance. And it will come from all of the forces. It just so happens that this time it's coming from Anand Gulsarand, but it will be repeated by the GHRA and TIGI and all of those other forces. The article was written in a manner where it was not accusing the PPP of anything, as the other articles. It was saying that maybe we should consider it. And that's why I wanted to approach it differently, because most of his writings have always placed the PPP as the obstacle to shared governance. So the winner takes all arrangement. So he says, historically, the People's Progressive Party, Chedi Jagan, said he'll move away from this system and that we should embrace it. But what has prevented us from embracing a system of shared governance? What has been our experience at attempting to do this? Years ago, when I was president, there was a paper called Towards Shared Governance, Building Trust Towards Shared Governance. Something along that line. And trust building is important for any system of shared governance to work, particularly at the level of the executive. In the absence of trust, there'll be no movement forward. You just grind to a halt. Because just imagine a cabinet that can't agree on basic policies. So we said, when the last time we had the constitutional reform, we said, how could we explore a system of shared governance at the parliamentary level, at the level of the legislature? And we put in place in the Constitution several features that shared power at the level of the legislature, which vastly differentiates us from the Westminster model practiced around the world, which is the winner-takes-all model. So if you explore what these are, I'm just waiting for something to come through. You would see that the 5 rights commissions were put in place. The Procurement Commission. For you to sit on any of these, you have to have 2/3 support from the National Assembly. No political party has 2/3 of the votes in the National Assembly, so it required collaboration to put together these commissions. We then, the 4 service commissions we put in place. I've dealt with this before. Can I just take this phone call? So I'm not going to today explore all of the methods that we've put in place, because the Rights Commission, the Procurement Commission, the 4 service commissions, the Parliamentary Management Committee with 5 chaired by the Speaker. Before that, it used to be only the executive control the Parliament. The reduction of the powers of the President, the position where with the appointment of the Chancellor and the Chief Justice, you have to have agreement between the opposition and the government. All of these were major attempts to shared power at the level of the Parliament. Even in the management, we put in place, apart from the Service Commission, 4 sectoral committees that would review government's policies in every area, in social services, economic services, foreign affairs, and natural resources. And we decided to rotate the chair of these sectoral committees in the parliament, unlike even in the US system, where the majority group in the parliament, the majority group, is that internal? The majority in the Congress in the United States would chair all the committees. We rotate the chairmanship. Nobody speaks of this. This is, you show me a country where they have gone to this extent to include the opposition or to give the opposition a voice. We have a unique constitution, and many of the measures that we put in place are not in the constitutions or the laws of most Commonwealth countries, because we recognize the need to share power at the level of the legislature, and that's being done now. I suspect they're all talking about executive power sharing, but we made it clear, and I hope that Gulsaran and the others, in a clear assessment as to why executive power sharing will not work in the absence of trust, and would examine the conditions that the PPP said we set ourselves to explore this even further. We said, first of all, that the PNC and AFC must move away from this misguided philosophy that they can bully the PPP into some form of executive power sharing. They have tried that historically using violence. That's one. They have to move away from that notion, because we don't respond well to threats of violence or bullying. We're a political party that fought for the freedom of this country for a very long period under very difficult circumstances to respond to threats of violence. And they have historically used that as a case for executive power sharing. The second precondition is you have to move away from rigged elections. Rigging elections to get people's support, or not to get their support, to get into power. The PNC has never disavowed their history. They've never admitted to this, what is known to the entire country, that they have sought to rig the elections. They've rigged the elections in the past, and they sought to rig the 2020 elections. Even now, they're living with the fallacy that we stole their mandate in 2020. So they're unwilling to accept that fact. There is no moving forward with that kind of mindset. And the third condition is moving away from racism as a mobilizing tool. That's the only thing that they've utilized. Of course, there should be other conditions, not like what they're trying to do with the AFC, share spoils in government. That's what they're trying to do. Who will get what? But you have to agree to a joint program for the development of the country and for the growth and prosperity of the people of that country. That's another condition, a joint program. So these are important prerequisites that we have laid out in the past as the basis for which we to explore some form of power sharing at the level of the executive to explore that. And if you don't have trust, for example, in the city council one time we agreed that we will rotate the mayorship. APNU took the first turn, and then when our turn came for Philomena Sahai Shuri to become the mayor, they reneged on it. It is that track record that bothers a lot of people. They're untrustworthy. So if you can't look at the gridlock we have in Parliament over some basic things. If you bring that same gridlock on a daily basis to the executive, it's a recipe for paralysis at the level of the executive. That means nothing gets done. We can't implement policies for education, healthcare, housing, water, because it would be constantly marred in controversy and lack of consensus, and the people will suffer. So we are not going to explore an arrangement where we can deliver on the promises that we made to the people of the country. Like we made promises in 2020, we have to fulfill those promises. We can't go and say to them, well, APNU block us from doing it. Because then they would say, well, why are you there? So for all of those people who are coming up with this new model, which often comes around election time, shared governance. Let's share governance and let's share power at the level of executive. So we already do share governance. We do that. Now we have done that. At the level of the judiciary, the two top posts in the judiciary have to be appointed substantively only through agreement between the government and opposition. At the level of the parliament, I've outlined to you all of the features, not in a detailed way, but we can do so at another time. But how we have moved away from a winner-takes-all system at the level of the parliament. But the executive level, you have to be very cautious. And then on the PPP level, we do share governance at the level of the executive. About 6 or 7 or maybe more of the members of the current cabinet are not members of the PPP. They're civic members. They're not card-bearing members of our party. But they came to us with the understanding that they will subscribe to our manifesto, our program, and that they will be respectful of people, they will be respectful of democracy, freedoms for people. They're not going to steal elections. You're not going to campaign on the basis of race, that we're a multi-ethnic party or a multi-religious party. They came to us on that basis, as a result of which they are part of the executive at the highest level, but they're not party members. So we do practice some form of power, shared governance at that level, but it's on the basis of people it's with people who are like-minded, and people, and look at the diversity of our cabinet. It would tell you a lot about the PPP. So that's how I wanted to deal with this. These recurrent calls that will come up from now on about shared governance, because you're going to get them from every other group, and they all blame the PPP. They don't look at the people, because they're pro-PNC outfits. They don't do any introspection. And maybe it's time for the introspection to take place from their side. Why would anyone want to share power with executive power with a political party that would that is racist in its outlook or that pushes violence or steals elections? Who would want to be tainted with sharing power with that political party? So again, a call for introspection. Maybe we can use Gulsaran's letter to address that matter. So Mr. Norton had a press conference last week. And there are three things from all of the talk that I don't know how long he spoke here, but clearly less than what I do at my press conferences. But I can glean three major themes here from all that he spoke of. He said that Adriana Young did not drown. He said that it was murder, or maybe that's the reporter, but he didn't disabuse. He said that I'm just going through this transcript here. He basically went along with the question of the reporter that it somehow was a murder. She did not drown. It's a murder, and there is a cover-up here. So it just tells you a lot. Now, we about Mr. Norton himself. These are the people who call for fact-based approaches to issues. We have had 3 international pathologists who came, one brought by the family, who concluded that after doing a forensic autopsy, concluded that the child died by drowning. They did not say the circumstances under which she drowned, but they concluded that the child died by drowning. These are people collectively who have had 50 years of experience and done thousands of cases, autopsy. Now, Norton, he knows more than the 3 pathologists. He concluded it's not drowning. He did his own autopsy, and he concluded that the child did not die by drowning, contrary to the report from the 3 pathologists, including a pathologist brought by the family themselves. So clearly, they want this issue to drag on. It's in to the benefit of the AFC, the PNC, APNU, and the other groups to have this matter drag on forever. It suits their political purpose. They have no sympathy for this child. They don't care too much about the child. Had it not been us approaching election season, they would not have cared at all. So clearly, we have to investigate the circumstances under which this child died. Those investigations are ongoing now, whether it is by natural cause or negligence. when she was in the pool, because there were lots of people there. And did she die in a manner where there was negligence, or was it foul play? We clearly have to conclude the investigation, and that's ongoing. They are not interested, they were never interested in the autopsy or the results of the autopsy, and they're not interested in the results of the investigation. They want a conclusion preconceived. Norton has already said it. Forget it. This child did not drown. And I suspect if 1,000 pathologists say that, including their own pathologists, because they brought in their pathologists, they're not going to be satisfied with this because it doesn't suit a political objective. So why do they need to prolong this issue? Because prior to this child dying tragically, and even now, nobody has been paying any attention to the PNC and AFC, APNU and AFC, because they don't have any achievements and they don't have anything to campaign on. People are not paying attention to them, were never paying attention, and will not pay attention to them because they have no issue to talk about that makes sense to the people of this country. They can't talk about fixing, building, getting a house lot for everyone, or helping them to build their homes because their track record is dismal. They can't talk about the children grant because they took it away. They can't talk about the old age pension that they promised to double in 100 years because we now double it in the 5 years we kept our promises. They can't talk about infrastructure at all because they did practically nothing. What are they going to talk about except this issue? And so this is not about justice anymore. So look at they did a flyer here. APNU invites you to join us. No, justice for Adriana Young. This is prostitution by APNU. They can't mobilize people on the issues as a political party. So then the APNU invites you to join us to reclaim our stolen mandate. The stolen mandate that we stole the elections in 2020, so they're reclaiming their stolen mandate and demand justice. This is how they're mobilizing people now to perpetrate their lies, using this child as a pawn with no sympathy. So this is you're never going to have a conclusion that will satisfy APNU AFC because they want to drag this out politically. Nobody will pay attention to them for anything else because they really can't. They demonstrated, apart from the racism, which is a dying breed, that they have no answers for the people of the country. So the instability and violence and all of that, that's why they're hoping to make people feel uneasy. So in the fear, they go back to camps. And they're hoping to repolarize the country because the racism that they were utilizing all the time was becoming less potent. So they're using this issue to try to polarize people back again along racial lines. This was never a matter of race. The whole country was upset with this child's death. We're all upset about the misleading statement that the police gave. I condemn it right here from the first day, when they found the body, minutes after they found the body. I call for accountability on the part of the police, saying how if you saw this child, you have a video of this child leaving, How did the child get back into the pool? That was my first press conference minutes after the child was found. It was never about that. But they are trying to hijack this tragedy to make it political because they don't have anything else. They're not going to offer you jobs. They're not talking about creating jobs for young people or better education. They're only now reclaiming their stolen mandate. This is what they've been pushing. So the second major thing from his press conference, apart from him being a pathologist now, Norton, is something that we've always said, that there could be a link, and there is a link between the PNC, AFC, and the Mohammeds. So when asked several times by, I think it was Dennis Chabrol, to disavow working with the sanctioned individuals, he refused to do so and tried to obfuscate the matter by painting hypothetical scenarios. What happens if the sanctions are removed? So we have established that link. It's clear. They are working together. We saw evidence of this where the AFC activists around the country, from Charles Sograme to the Ramaya to the man in the Essequibo Coast, they were all AFC activists who have been mobilizing for the Mohammeds. We've seen the meeting between Nigel Hughes and the Mohammeds. Nigel Hughes said at his meeting he needed legal advice from Trotman at the meeting, so I don't know what advice he needed, and political advice he needed from Trotman. What political advice, if you're meeting a client, a potential client, would you need by having the presence of Raphael Trotman at the meeting? It was all a lie. And for example, we've seen the link with some of the Tushaus who are avowed PNC members. They're the ones organizing, not the people there. The people in these communities don't care too much for the Mohammeds. They don't even know who they are. So they're mobilizing on the ground for the Mohammeds. There is a link. And so it's quite clear. Norton let the cat out the bag. He said, no, I'm not going to say no, never. But they're already working together. So this is a revelation. I must commend the reporter who pressed him. So because this is very, very important. You're going to see denials on their part again. But I think the people of this country are smart enough to know a donkey when you see it. You can't fool us because we've all seen donkeys. Maybe some people have not. If you live maybe in an urban area, I don't think everybody has seen a donkey. But we know a donkey when we see it. And this connection and the backroom deals and all of that, it's been going on. So then he said, the third thing, they will win the elections. with AFC or without AFC. And you know my view on that. He needs serious medical attention if he actually believes that. But apart from that, he called me a yard fowl. I was a yard fowl and all of that stuff like that. Norton is the sophisticated poultry. I'm the yard fowl. He is sophisticated poultry, yeah. And very intellectual, these AI kind of things here, in an AI way. I saw he is clueless about ring fencing. Somebody needs to tell this man, explain what ring fencing is. Even Kite Show News had to lecture him on ring fencing, which is a stretch. He didn't know he didn't understand the concept. And this is our sophisticated poultry that we're dealing with, who is the opposition leader. So I just thought I'd deal with his press conference, and then an interesting thing. No, so we asked people to submit their ideas for our manifesto. And I must say to you that it keeps growing. Large numbers of ideas have been coming in, etc. As of earlier this week, this is what we have so far. All of these came from different people. A lot of them we've been already talking about and we plan to put in the manifesto, but we really appreciate this. So Norton decided to pull the same thing off. So he said, you can contact Norton on WhatsApp now and ask Aubrey C. Norton the question that matters most to you, your family, your future. So he did a little twist here. We asked for manifesto ideas for the future. So you have to ask Aubrey Norton as though he has the answers. So since he wants us to ask, maybe I could start by asking a few questions. So how about, when will you stop rigging elections, Aubrey? When will you stop supporting lawlessness? The second question. When will you take responsibility for when your party pauperized Guyana in the 28 years that led us to be the poorest country in the hemisphere, the most debt-laden country in the hemisphere, and the disastrous 5 years? When will you be taking responsibility for that? What about failing the Afro-Guyanese community in Guyana, the whole country, but failing the community that looked up to your party for leadership, and you have not provided any to these young kids who have, instead of trying to find a scholarship for them, like what we are trying to do. Earlier this week, I met with a number of young people from East and West Rumveld, and all of them, I said to them, I went through the room, asked them if they're studying, I brought Minister Hamilton to the meeting. We talked about training programs, the gold scholarship, improvement in their lives. They talk about housing, what kind of help in the future they can get. That sort of conversation we've had. We went to Lane Avenue 2 years ago. We got 60-something of the young ladies to go and get trained in different area. A lot of the young men there. We went to Sophia. We launched a training program too, like we're doing across the country. That's the conversation we have with people when we go into these communities. For them, it's all about the PPP will discriminate against you. You don't apply for the scholarship, you're not going to get it. Negative all the time. We have to go and protest for something. Protest. The mindset not to own things and acquire things, which we try to instill in people. We want you to own. I said several times at a meeting, you got to acquire things in life, not to go on rent. Now, we want you to own a home. That's the kind of thing. They've failed the Guyana, but the Afro-Guyanese community. When are you going to take responsibility for this? So, if these are just some of the questions. I'd love, since he wants me to ask Aubrey Norton, I started off with the first few questions to him. But people now, they saw their own polls. Let me tell you, they've done polls. They've seen their polls. I've had indications of what the polls are. He is disaster. Nigel Hughes doesn't fare much better. People don't, AFC, APNU, they associate them together. And they were together, and they may come together again. But people associate them with the period where nothing happened in the country. So they know they will have a disastrous showing at the elections. They know that already. That's why they're getting so desperate and have to capitalize on trying to polarize the country again using this child's death. This is why they're doing it, because they've seen the polls. So Aubrey, I hope you will answer my questions. I'm the first to use his WhatsApp. I didn't use it. I may call and type this into his WhatsApp thing, these questions there. But it would be good to do this. And why wouldn't you've had Amna Ali in your party for 50 years. He didn't show up at the wake nor the funeral. What kind of vindictive, small-minded leader are you? This is a former general secretary of the party. That's another question. Yeah, let me ask him since I'm asking Aubrey Norton. Vindictive, small-minded leader. You know, for that. And it's not like she ever left the PNC mentally. I did not know Amna Ali very well because I did not engage in many conversations with her until maybe 2020 or so. But from 2020 to 2025, although she was dissatisfied with what was going on in the party and Norton's leadership, mentally she didn't leave the PNC. And she grew up like maybe as a young girl in the party. And this guy, through his vindictiveness, and didn't show up. What kind of leader are you? And you were talking about unifying people and all of that sort of thing. So he is a small-minded leader. And just imagine a government headed by Norton. Just imagine a government headed by Norton. Well, I can't imagine it, because it's not going to happen. I've seen a number of people talk about the foreign currency market. And the sanctioned individual posted that we must allow him to continue smuggling to keep the foreign currency market in equilibrium. Well, it's warped logic, and it's utterly stupid. So I just wanted you, since we're dealing with fact-based stuff, now we can pass these things off as a joke. But a foreign currency market and its management is not a joke for the country. And I want to give you some figures that would show you how our foreign currency market has changed in complexity and in depth. So first of all, in 2020, total imports into Guyana was $2.2 billion. In 2025, it's projected to be $9 billion US. That's the growth of import. Our exports are now that includes oil, $19 billion. So clearly, our exports, we have a trade surplus, about $10 billion of surplus. But our imports have grown phenomenally. Now, there are three types of goods: consumer goods, intermediate goods, and capital goods. Those are the main components of your imports. On consumer goods in 2020, we were importing 496 million. Now it's $1.1 billion. So consumer goods, this is stuff that people buy and stuff like that, has grown by over 100%. Intermediate goods was $1 billion, and now it's $3.1 billion. Now, intermediate goods is good for a country when you have a great or higher levels of import of intermediate goods, because it means that you process that into final output. It speaks a lot about the level of economic activities in the country. And then capital goods have grown from 690 million to 4.7 billion. So clearly you have seen that the foreign currency to support imports now, if you take all of it, but just look at maybe consumer goods, take out intermediate and capital goods. Consumer goods alone has increased by $600 million US, just for consumer goods over the past 5 years. And when you add the others, you're talking about nearly a 7 billion increase in total imports. So you have to find a foreign currency for all of this. As I made it clear that the central bank has the capacity to intervene in the market when necessary. But the market has not only changed in depth and complexity, there are some new features of the market. For example, historically, capital goods, very little capital goods were financed from our foreign currency market. It used to be mainly consumer goods and intermediate goods. But our capital imports have grown from 600 and something million dollars now to over $4 billion. So it means we're financing a lot of capital expansion in Guyana. So whilst it may put some pressure on the foreign currency now, but it will in the future on the BOP. Remember, when you borrow from abroad or you have FDI financing your capital investments, you have to repay that either through dividends or through repayment of the loans. So in the short term, it puts pressure on your BOP. and obviously your exchange rate, but in the long term it could be good, or it's better in the long term. So that's one feature now that has seen an increase in demand. Number two is the Trinidadian demand. So this is happening through several places, and we're looking at this now. You know, in Trinidad, it's practically impossible to get foreign currency in that market. People don't write about that, but in the Trinidad, businessmen have to wait for ages, 6 months, 8 months, etc. They cannot get foreign currency in that market. You should examine what's going on. So we have, over the last few years, we have witnessed a phenomenon here where we believe that some of the invoices submitted by companies are inflated because they're local companies, but inflated invoices, so that when the payment goes to their suppliers, it's for goods that would go into Trinidad and Tobago. Secondly, some of the cambios and banks, to a lesser extent the banks, are now selling the currency to Trinidadians who come here, foreign currency, to them, because they come here to get the foreign currency. And then thirdly, you have some local companies now that are capitalizing on the arbitrage. So they buy from the banks and the cambios at maybe 216 or so, and they're selling to the Trinidadians at 220, 224. They're making money now on the side. So we have a big additional demand now, apart from the growth generally of the economy and the increase in consumer goods, intermediate goods, capital goods import to $9 billion now. We also have this new demand. So when it takes 2 weeks to get foreign currency here, you check what happens in another country, just neighboring. You will see what is really going on. But we have enough resources to intervene in the market. I've dealt with this in the past, to ensure that the domestic demand, even in the enhanced domestic demand, which is for legitimate purposes, will be satisfied. So we don't need one man said, because he's sanctioned, you have foreign currency shortages. So what could happen here is that maybe there are still illegal purchases of gold and it's stashed somewhere, and therefore it's not being sold and the foreign currency is not coming back. That could be what they mean by that. I don't want to speculate, but for someone to make an asinine statement like that, it's unbelievable that they're even seriously thinking about contesting an election and really arguing that the US sanctions against him is the cause of the foreign currency shortages here. It's ridiculous. I took time to address the matter so that you can understand the nature of the market now. It's a $9 billion import market now versus a $2 billion import market 5 years ago. And it is only because of the careful stewardship that we've been able to ride this out, smoothen the market. You can get these figures anywhere. And I hope people who are writing about this do it from a fact-based perspective. I mean the serious media, not those. I just wanted to show contrast again, because there's so many things we can talk about, achievements in every sector, which the opposition finds hard to do. So I just wanted to talk about an entirely new area that we have been giving leadership globally to. It's in the area of sustainability. So if you're contrasting political parties and looking at track records of political parties, because that's what you have to do when you contest elections, you have to look at track record. So what is APNU track record on sustainability? So President Hoyt announced the Iraq some years ago, announced Iraq, but no funding for it, just made an announcement. And then Granger took about $2 million of money we had earned through the LCDS to develop his Green State strategy, which was about basically planting trees, couldn't earn anything. And he didn't develop it indigenously. He contracted UNEP, GGGI, and the others. That's the Global Green Growth Institute, United Nations Environmental Program, and a series of consultants to do this. So this was a consultant-driven document. He planted some trees in Bartica, 2 trees in Mabaruma that he flew in to plant, and that was their Green State. Took the solar panel that we bought for the Amerindian communities, put it on State House. That was their Green State strategy. They then promised that by 2025, we would supply 100% of our electricity will come from renewable source, but kill the hydro, so left us with what Pato left us with, you know. No project to accomplish it. That's 2020, nothing to start. That's their track record on green growth and sustainability. So what's our track record? Our track record has been one of the first low carbon development strategies in the world. We pioneered a carbon credit scheme. We got one of the largest. In 2009, we signed one of the largest carbon credit sale through a bilateral arrangement with Norway, and that is on a per capita basis. We utilize a significant part of those funds to accelerate the Amerindian land titling program. We use some of it we left a lot of it on the APNU because they were supposed to use it for the telecom expansion, particularly to the hinterland communities. We had about 85 million left that was supposed to go to the hydro that's being used for the solar program. Now, I can go down the long list of it. But how did we develop our LCDS? Did we get foreign consultants to do it? We got McKinsey and Company to do a study for us to look at some options. And we defined the options. What if we were to deforest, cut all of our trees down and left only 10% with the greatest biodiversity value? How much we would, and convert 90% of the forest into economic activities, how much we could earn from the alternate economic activities per year. And we said we came up with an equity of about a return of about between 500 million per year to about $2 billion. And we said if we can get a program, a global program, that would compensate us at 500 million per year to maintain our forest cover, then we can outcompete alternate use. So we are building a theoretical model. When we built this, we started building this model. Globally, even the NGOs were opposed to forests even being part of a formal trading system. It's still not part of the formal compliance market. We're now pushing to get it as part of a compliance market. Everybody was opposed to it. And we demonstrated using the model that we could outcompete alternate use of the forest, that they had a cost curve using one of the lowest cost abatement solution, which is avoiding deforestation. And as a result of that, I don't want to go into all the details. I'm going into too many things here already. But we develop it indigenously. We then had consultations in across the coast. If you look at 2008 or so, consultations, hundreds of consultations across the coast in the hinterland community. We then had text messages going out to people. We put up a website. That's how we develop our model. Our people were integrally involved. We set up a steering committee that I chaired that involved young people, the women, the indigenous people's organization, the people in the forestry sector, the miners, and we met once a month to ensure that we move forward on the model. It was an indigenous Guyanese effort, and we came up with a product that is still now used as a model many parts of the world, because we did it on a sound theoretical foundation, and we demonstrated how forest carbon or avoided deforestation or reducing the rate of deforestation can be one of the biggest, lowest cost solution for climate change, because deforestation and land degradation still contributes about 16% of greenhouse gases. We did this all on our own. This was a PPP developed model, but with the help with a lot of local people. We earned from it, and we utilized the money for Guyana. We came back to office now after 5 disastrous years where nothing happened. We then went back, started working again. We got the architecture for REDD+ transaction to certify our credits. It took nearly a year and a half through the COVID period. We worked at this international certification, our entire forest, where we were the first country to have a jurisdictional scale certification. Our entire forest was certified. No country in the world had that. We then restarted a program for the sale of forest carbon. We got the carbon credits, 30% of our carbon credits sold for $750 million. It's the best deal now available in the whole world, because we got we got up to $20 per ton of carbon for forest carbon, when in the market now it's probably $2.50 some markets. Of course, even recently we sold some into the Courtier market, and we got some good prices, but small quantities. That we even went back to 2015, and we got what is considered a vintage credit from 2015 to 2020. We sold some of that too. So we had to pick up back from the lost years of the APNU, their inept years. That money now is, the Amerindian community's got $9.6 billion in the first 2 years of it, their 15% share, and the rest is going to transform our country, to keep it climate-proof our country, right across Guyana. Pumps, 40 pumps, 62 new cokers, 19 pumping stations with 39 fixed pumps, several Hope-like canals that would open up about 85,000 acres of land and safeguard those villages and coast. All of that is being funded from this. APNO has nothing. This is all because of an initiative of the PPP government. We've expanded the LCDS. So we have earned significant sums of money. That's our track record here. Now, beyond that, we've been giving leadership because of this model. You know, at COP26 in Glasgow, there was this, the FCLP. It's called the Forest and Climate Leadership Leaders Partnership. Forest and Climate Leaders Partnership was established. That was to reverse and halt deforestation and degradation by 2030. Several countries subscribed to that. We were elected as co-chair with the UK. For the past several days now, they have had a meeting in Guyana, the FCLP. They're examining our track record on this matter, how we did it using a market-based mechanism. So this is, again, we're giving global leadership. We're co-chairing this group that was established at COP26 in Glasgow, and the objective is to halt and reverse deforestation by 2030. And people are studying the Guyana model, and they're in Guyana for that purpose, how to explore initiatives there. So I'm extremely pleased that we're also giving leadership in this regard globally. Then, as you know, the Global Biodiversity Alliance will have its first summit here in Guyana in July of this year. And again, I think because of our model, they wanted to host it here. So our success with carbon-related forest, carbon-related financing, we're now trying to see if the same approach could be used in biodiversity financing. Since we started off, when we were building this model, I remember us doing a paper with some staff at the Office of the President on looking at payment for ecosystem services. At that time, we were looking at water, biodiversity, and other services outside of the forest carbon services. So now we're returning to this here. We're looking forward to sharing our experience with carbon financing and see if we can't utilize the same experience to get more funding to go into biodiversity conservation and protection. So that will be one of the objectives of the conference, the summit here in Guyana. Secondly is how we can extend advocacy for the protection and conservation of biodiversity. You know, there is a formula, 30% by 2030, to see how we can get more buy-in around that formula. We are already doing work now to implement that in Guyana. Then to try to see if we can come up with a common global platform for monitoring progress on biodiversity, because they have many monitoring tools, but we need a global unified platform that would give us the same results. That would be the third objective. And then of course, seeing if we can bring together, work at unifying the three conventions. We have, in our new LCDS, we have expanded the scope now to cover not just forest, but biodiversity and water management. So there are three conventions basically, one on desertification, which deals with water, UN conventions, one on biodiversity, and then the UNFCCC convention to deal with climate change. So how we can bring these together, because they're related, and they all point to sustainability. So you have to look at sustainability in its multifaceted forms. So we're looking forward to giving global leadership again on these matters. And also earning for our people. The Amerindians are now getting billions of dollars from this. We're funding almost all of our drainage and irrigation and flood control and water management in the future from money there, not the taxpayers' money. And we're preserving our forests at the same time and our biodiversity. So multiple objectives. You let Nigel Hughes tell us what the AFC has done or will do. They have no clue. In fact, they tried to block the funding from Norway. They are Norton too. And not Norton, but the PNC. They've had no track record on it. Absolutely none. So when you contrast the political parties and leadership, you have to look at all of these things. That's one area. I just wanted to mention it. And I'm hoping Norton will address this in great length to what his party did over the 30 years, maybe 30-something years in this regard. Outside of signing conventions, everybody signs conventions, all the parties go to a conference and sign conventions. We have made this work for Guyana. We have made it work for our people. We have earned from it. We've created opportunities. We have utilized the money earned. Now we're getting 35 megawatts of solar panel from money earned there in Linden, Essequibo, and Berbice. That's being implemented now, where the Amerindians have seen accelerated land title from the same resources too. It's 1,800 projects that they would get now. And speaking of Amerindian development, I would like on Monday the NTC starts, National Tushao Council, and I'm looking forward to this again, because we will be able to contrast again as political parties our approaches to the development of Amerindian communities and compare track records. So I want the APNU to say what track record they have in these areas, because I know we've increased the land titling from about 5% of Guyana to about 16.2% of Guyana. That is through land titles. The activity is ongoing. That is one of the big achievements of our government. 2, we passed an Amerindian Act that gave subsurface rights for small and medium scale mining to indigenous communities, a veto power over that. That gave them internal self-governance, basically. They can provide rules for their villages and enforce those rules. That outlined a procedure for assessing land issues, which is you have to be on a land for 25 years and a community over 150 persons before you can claim additional lands. But there was no rule before that, so communities that couldn't even move forward in this regard, that's part of the Amerindian Act. And there are many other features there. We then, under the PPP government, we created an indigenous in the parliament, in the Constitution of Guyana, an Indigenous Peoples Commission that APNU tried to water down. That's the second major achievement, or the third major achievement. I can go down the list on. So I told you about the 9.6 billion that the indigenous communities got in these 2 years from the LCDS funds that APNU and their surrogate APA tried to block. This year again, their communities are going to get over $4 billion from this year's allocation. So when they come out here, they would be getting over $4 billion again. Just imagine the thousands of projects that have been done. The first $4 billion or so did over 1,500 projects in these communities, and you see signs of it. So no other party has done that. They under the Amerindian Development Fund, in the past 3 years, we have spent over $3 billion in these communities. We have rehired the 1,972 CSOs that APNU fired, and it is now over nearly 3,000 CSOs. When you add the part-time workers in these communities now, you have nearly 5,000 people who are now working when 2020, who now have a job or a stipend. Not a full-time job, but a stipend they earn from that. So they were not getting that. 5,000, I want to hear their response to that, what APA would say about that too. I can go down the long list of things, the secondary schools that are being built. You go to Hosororo or Quebana or Karasabay and look at the size of these schools. I don't want to list all of them. You'd see the major one. Billions of dollars in these areas. If you go and look at the road network in Region 1 from we're extending the road in Moruca Subdistrict, and it would go all the way to Quebana, from Mabaruma, and the whole settlement now we are doing all the roads going all the way to Hosororo, in the Matakai Subdistricts, all the interconnected roads being done. In Lethem Trail, all the bridges are being done now. In the villages, we have 8 villages now where we're doing paved roads in the villages, 4 being completed, 4 others have started recently. And this just mirrors what's going on here. We have had 30,000 since we got into office. 30,000 people got a free solar panel with the unit, and we just brought in another 8,000 because for the riverine areas, not just Amerindian, but riverine areas will get these too. I can go down a tractor and trailer for each community that didn't have it when we got into office. I can list hundreds of Amerindians trained in the police force as nurses who got jobs in the communities. I was just dealing with the ones directly in the communities, but elsewhere, I can go down a long list of things being done. So when people pop in these communities now and talk nonsense, we have a track record of these communities. And when we're in opposition, these communities voted overwhelmingly for the PPP. You think now that with our track record from 2020 to now, that suddenly they're gonna give up on the PPP? That what's the alternative? They know that. So all of those who are engaged in wishful thinking that somehow, they're making a breakthrough in the Amerindian areas, etc. You have a lot of people who are collecting some money now, or the PPP haters. In every one of these places, you have a couple of APNU PPP haters. In every community, we're not going to get 100%. I wish we could get that, but we're not going to get 100%. But we already got the overwhelming support in opposition when APNU was running in there and carrying in all sorts of things. What do you think now? The respect that the Tushaus get when they come out, you ask them about it. The help in their communities. I didn't even talk about training programs of women, the housing program alone. We're doing 300 plots in the Madhya sub-district. Madhya was not all Amerindians, but we won the township there. Every one of these communities have seen massive development. The children grant that they got, some of them got business grants, etc. So I can tell you what we did. Let APNU tell you. They'd have a hard time. The minister collected $2 million in stipend to fly into the Amerindian community, made one trip in and didn't receive, not stipend, they call it advance, and they didn't utilize it. So a lot of them took the money for themselves. They just would fly in and fly out back, never engage the communities. We've been engaging all the time. So I'm looking forward to the Starbuck News all week putting, oh, this community not very happy and all of that. The APA line all the time. APA is PNC. But they're engaged in wishful thinking like Nagamootoo. Nagamootoo resurfaced from his hole and he put out a story last week, oh, that the PPP will become a minority government. This crook, this guy, a crook, he squatted in the office for 5 months after the elections, were trying to justify the stealing of the elections. And if you listen to him, he's the conscience of the PPP still. He's the conscience of the PPP. And he's the conscience of Chedi Jagan, you know. They always call Chedi Jagan's name. And now advocating shared governance because we will be a minority government. But think about this. Just think, if anybody has any brain, they would analyze it like this. In 2020, the PPP won the elections from opposition. APNU controlled the army and police. They utilized the police in many ways, like at the GCOM building. We defy that. They spent $419.5 billion after the no confidence motion without parliamentary oversight. Control all of the media, the government media. We defy that. They tried to rig the elections. We defy that. They went to court. They did all sorts of things. They even tried to instigate protests. They used government funding to buy all of their material and sub-election material. They lost the elections. Since 2020, take PNC. Has PNC grown stronger or weaker? Nobody wants to hear about the APNU anymore under Norton. They've weakened considerably. The AFC, practically nobody pays attention to them. These are our biggest foes. Or, well, opponents. Let me don't say foes. On the other hand, the PPP has demonstrated growth. You see it in the multi-ethnic nature of our party. You see it in the local government election results. These are verifiable, measurable metrics that you can go to and say, yes, I've seen it. Not anecdote and gaffe by a couple of the TIGI and Nagamootoo, the old fossils, and the GHRA and the GPA, the Press Association. They're all pro-PNC units. You're going to believe them? What are their metrics to say they're using to say that the PPP will be a minority government? It's nonsense. So if you analyze things properly, then you would realize that it's wishful they're thinking on their part. They're hoping that somehow that would scare the PPP to say, oh, let's share power. That's their objective. Let's share power now. And then Norton throws in his occasional threat of violence and, oh, they will not accept election results. What's new? When has the PNC ever accepted election results? Nothing new. Absolutely nothing. So my point is that we have to keep using these metrics. Let me move on to the GPA. I don't understand. They talk about media blackout, that we don't share enough. Again, Kaituo News likes to push that line, expanding the media and information blackout. Now, clearly, somebody is now analyzing again, because you have to analyze things. What's good in life is side-by-side comparisons. And any person who doesn't subscribe to this thinking, this collective thinking, often you're never going to convince the crazy ones out there. You have like some people who are crazy and they would believe anything. Like you know, they were spreading rumors Irfan Ali and Jagdeo sacrificed Adriana Young. They were spreading that rumor, and some crazy people, but they go from all of the crazy sites to the others, pushing that line. Pure, ungodly kind of propaganda. But they don't care. If anybody works with Obia, it's the PNC. They're the Obia party. They done with us. Why do we need? We work for people's votes. We work for people's votes. That's why we would win. We don't need that. But if people had done side-by-side comparisons, the middle ground, even the undecided, when you look at elections and people who are looking to their own future, I just ask that you do it on Amerindian development, you do it on external leadership and earning money for the country. We can do it on infrastructure, compare the two parties. We can do it on healthcare, education, side-by-side comparisons. But this expanding media and information blackout. Look at the oil and gas sector. Go and look at, for the 5 years on the APNU, how many times you had a press conference dealing with oil and gas issues. Not a single time. If they basically had a couple of words, literally a couple of words from Trotman when he was minister, he said practically nothing about the sector. Even they lied about the agreements they signed. He didn't say anything about it. No accountability. And when Granger took over as minister of the natural resources sector, he also said practically nothing. We have spoken about oil and gas matters 100 times. I've been outlining all of it. Look at even tomorrow, we're going to pass the law that will ensure that all of the oil and gas companies and those who are transporting oil and gas through our waters, that they are faced with full liability should there be an oil spill. And we are fixing problems. So we're not relying only on a 2 billion guarantee or whatever else. That would be overtaken now by this law. And that's going to be passed through the parliament tomorrow and signed by the president. And it becomes law. We have fixed the PSA. We have fixed the Petroleum Act. We have put in local content law. Look at, contrast that with the PNC. Nothing. They did nothing. They said nothing. And every week we talk about it. And the shameless people in the GPA and some of the other media are saying information blackout on the oil and gas sector. President Ali this year has had more press conferences, maybe 2 press conferences, than Granger had in 5 years. But he gets criticized for it. We've had more information on health, on education, on housing, every day on water than you've had in the whole, in 5 years of APNU, you'll get in 1 month, we put out more information on all of these areas. So, this is total lie, but I suspect I saw the GPA statement, and it's mean-spirited, and it fits right into Nazima Raghube's thinking. I don't know what sort of journalist she is, because I don't see her publications in newspapers or anywhere else. But listen to what she said here. In the statement criticizing the president, your idea facilitates the backdoor entry of squatters parading as reporters. This is in a GPA statement saying that the president or the president's idea facilitates the backdoor entry of squatters parading as reporters. She's talking today about people who have social media, are influencers, and have, website where a lot of people, or Facebook pages and Instagram pages where a lot of people go, and TikTok pages go to get some info. This disdain for people who have a greater reach, and more people actually get their news from those sites. It's total disdain for them. You just imagine we were to say this, that they're squatters and that parading as reporters. So who, and anyhow, let me just don't go on. These people just infuriate me, because it's this, the unaccountable GPA. I don't know what they've done for reporters. If you talk about bias, they're the epitome of bias in the country. They would twist every article to make the PPP look bad. The transgressions on the APNU that they overlooked, now they magnify those under the PPP, invent and magnify, even where they don't exist. This is a jaundiced group. And so they accuse the president of trying to suppress press freedom in Guyana, because he wants, everybody to have a free environment, influencers and everyone else, a free environment. They're the ones who want to curtail people's freedom to source their information from whomever they want to. They believe they have a monopoly on putting out information to people, the public. And they also have a monopoly on getting public money, ads and everything else, regardless of how crappy their services are and how few people use them. This is the GPA for you. And a long 40 pages document or something like that, they put out a lot of trash in this. Trash. This is, but they are part of that cabal. Look out for them. They're going to surface more and more. GPA, remember the name, GPA, TIGI, the Human Rights Association, Red Thread, the APA, they're all PNC, AFC outfits. They're just PNC, AFC outfits. You see them, it's like they got their direction from Congress Place. And G2U, too. They got their directions from Congress Place. So don't pay too much heed to any of those individuals. I just end here. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo. Cordell Jones from Live Iron News. Another Guyanese associated with the Mohammeds has been hit with U.S. visa sanctions. You've been speaking about this over and over. Could you share your thoughts on this?
So, I've been trying to avoid speaking about the Mohammeds. People say, oh, they have not declared to run, and why is Jagdeo criticizing them? So they're looking for sympathy on one hand, and then the other group is saying, we are commenting on them because we're afraid of the Mohammeds running at the elections. Now, personally, I wish they would run so I can deal with it on the campaign trail. Let me tell you that. That as Jagdeo, not General Secretary of the party. So then when we mount the platform, we could actually, because that's fair game. Once you're a political party, it's fair game to look at your record and all of that. It's fair game. So personally, I wish that would happen. But the PPP has no fear of the Mohammeds running at the elections. If they think that the occasional paying people to attend a couple of meetings or getting some people by offering them a couple things, which the people should take, by the way, to come to a meeting, if that would influence people to ignore all of the track record of the PPP and the achievements and put their future in the hands of a criminal enterprise, they gotta be crazy. So I don't want anybody to interpret what I'm saying here as any of those two things that I mentioned before. But it's irksome to see the blatant lies that they tell. It's really irksome. So first thing is that they're running and hiding from the first question. They would refuse to answer one question. Did they smuggle 10,000 kilograms of gold in 5 years and avoid $50 million of taxes, evade $50 million of taxes? You notice until now, with all of the statements, public statements, and the letter writing from members of the family, they refuse to answer one question. Just one question. They would refuse to answer it. So I can give them my Thursday slot, not at Freedom House. They can do it there. Next Thursday at 2 p.m., let them have a press conference there. And have Azruddin Mohammed meet the press like this and answer questions from the press. It's a simple thing. The AFC does it. Nigel Hughes, with all of his all over the place answers, at least he does it. And Norton again does that. They're political entities, and they're critical of the PPP, but they at least I can respect them for facing the press. So just answer that one question. I'd give them my slot. I'd step down next Thursday to 2 p.m. and have you go there to have them host a press conference to answer that question. That's the first question. I can give you 4 other questions, but should they decide to host it, then that's fine. So that's the first issue. The second lie that they've been telling to people over and over, from the father and all of the other members of the family, that association with them doesn't have consequences, although the OFAC sanctions made it very, very clear. Whether you're a U.S. citizen or a citizen of any country, association with them has consequences and could lead to a law enforcement action. So they're saying, the father said, PPP is lying. There are people who lost their visas. Literally hundreds of people were associated with the PPP. None of the people associated with them lost their visas. But every person who lost their visa was questioned about the Mohammeds. not about the PPP, about the Mohammeds. So in this case, again, I was shocked, amazed to see how they're trying to spin the latest sanction. And you can call it whatever you want. You can call it whatever you want. Odessa Primus, and really, we should not. I'm sorry she lost her visa. I'm sorry she lost her visa. And that may not be the end of the world. And I wish her well. But they would have us believe. They said, first of all, they said, oh, it was not revoked, it was just canceled. And trying to point out some difference between revocation and cancel. And she self-canceled. So you would have us believe, you're stretching our imagination, that she packed her bag in Guyana, booked a ticket, jumped on a plane, went to New York and asked them to cancel her visa and then come back home. She could have gone into the embassy and asked for the cancellation right here. And that is what they were spinning. And this country got some really stupid people, really, who are pushing that line. And then hanging on to something that the US ambassador said, that where she was pointing out the different kinds of sanctions, that OFAC sanctions by the Treasury are different than other kinds of sanctions. Not speaking about this specific case, thank God the US ambassador clarified that, as though it changed the whole story. So why was she sanctioned, her visa withdrawn? Was it because she was carrying gold into the country? Was she smuggling drugs? No. The answer is no. It had to be with association. Remember, her saying this, I have my visa here, making it seem to people out there that there are no consequences. She was propagating that, oh, there are no consequences. Well, if people believe that and believe what they're saying, well, it's up to you. It's up to you to believe it. But they keep peddling this line all the time. Oh, it's not us. And let me tell you, one guy who lost his visa because of them said, when he mentioned it to them, this was about a while back, they were laughing. They were laughing. They want people to share the misery that they're going through. And what? They want this country to put the country at risk, all of the people at their country at risk. They're upset with us because they lost their cambio license and all of the other engagements, all their bank accounts here in Guyana. But they want us to put at risk the life of every single Guyanese so we can get sanctioned. The financial system would get sanctioned so all of our people get affected to protect them. That is what they're going there. This whole going around and all of that is to get public support. This is what they've been doing. And so I didn't want, for weeks I stayed away from these guys. And look at the latest thing. So let's see how the courts would rule, because it seems as though in this country, if you are wealthy, then you have special treatment. The GRA has gone after people for taxes, $500,000 of taxes. They've gone after them. They've seized people's vehicle, public servants, other people, poor people. Routinely they do this. 300 vehicles they've seized because of transgression. Here it seems as though a different rule applies. Now we have evidence. The commissioner today, Stacia, filed a criminal case because it's false declaration is a crime according to our laws. They've charged many people with false declarations before. He's put in his document, the court record, that he paid $75,000 for the vehicle. The GRA, through the designated contact point, which is the Ministry of Home Affairs, sent off a letter to the Treasury through the OFAC, the Mutual Assistance Treaty that we have, and they've received the evidence from the Treasury Department in the US. The invoice is for $695,000. There's a perjury before the court. You filed a false affidavit. But that seems to be normal with this group. That seems to be normal with the group. That you can do this and get off. And let's see how the court will go today. Because it seems as though I don't know how that will go. And often I saw a Starbuck News editorial where two persons, the people who were killed over the river, horrific killing. I went to the funeral. We were in the opposition at that time. They were burnt in the building. And the judge directed the jury to return a not guilty verdict. And then the Starbuck News, linking it with the Adriana Young matter in the same story, went after the executive as though the judge or judges are infallible in this country. Why not speak about the judiciary? Because they did the work, they presented the case. Judges are not infallible too, as we've seen in the election cases. Look how many rulings. If we had gone with some of the rulings from the Court of Appeal here, we would have been out of power today had it not been for the CCJ. So it's the same kind of approach. Let's see how it goes today. I don't know, the case is being heard today, but you're faced with evidence now from the US government sending us the evidence here. But they're routing you. You would see what new excuse they will come up with. They're good at excuses, but they will not answer the question about the smuggling of gold and how much was smuggled before, and if they're still engaged in this practice now of buying gold illegally, because if the person is saying that the foreign currency is not flowing back to the market, then he may have something to do with it. So these are and then they lie again about not working with the PNC and AFC. They're in bed together. It's a blatant lie. It's a blatant. I see some of the sites associated with the PNC now, from the moment Norton said that, they're calling for the removal of sanctions on him. They're not concerned about the $50 million lost through the smuggling of gold. So when people say, oh, why you're going, they're making it look like we're going after him because he's going to run and he poses a threat to the PPP. He poses no threat to the PPP whatsoever. They're going to say it on the campaign trail. But he could get a chance to rebut all that I'm saying by the same way I'm saying it, hosting a press conference and answering all of this, including questions about paper shorts and everything else. Could answer all of those questions openly, clear the air for the people of Guyana, and rebut what's going on. It's straightforward. But you want to bet it doesn't happen? He'd hide and post little statements that other people draft all the time on his page. That's how, yeah, go on.
Dr. Jagdeo, Mikhail Rodriguez for Daybreak News. In reference to part of your last statement, about charges being brought against Azzedine Mohammed for false declaration. Something unusual happened. It's not charges being brought against him today. There is a statement suggesting that he'll be charged, but he has to appear in court on the 29th. Obviously, GRA has once again given the Mohammeds the opportunity to move to the high courts and create disarray with these matters. Is the government's unwillingness to see that the Mohammeds have compromised the Guyana Revenue Authority willing or accidental?
Well, I wouldn't put my neck on the block for individuals. I would not put my neck on the block for individuals because they, in many cases, they share information with people. It happens from the police force, happens with the GRA, and I'm aware of it. And we almost know some of the individuals who've been doing this. And by the way, on the other matter, on the same Odessa Primus matter, I'm sure the way the US works is they take information from your phone when you go up on that thing. So the phone will be a treasure trove for all of those who have been sharing information and who've been linked, the influencers and all of the others who've been propagating quietly this, and the trolls and everything who are getting paid. I'm sure that they have good information there. I'd be happy to see the information myself if the US government would share it, but they would not share it with us. But it must be a treasure trove for information to see who are connected. So coming back to this issue, I don't know if the courts allow what is so evident on this matter. An invoice from the US government, official Department of Treasury, saying that the invoice of person paid $695,000 for the Lamborghini instead of $75,000 declared. Two, we have from the GBTI $690-something thousand transmitted to that company in several tranches. What more do you need? And then common sense. Where in the world would you find a Lamborghini for $75,000? Even your mother wouldn't sell you a Lamborghini for $75,000. It's common sense too. We need to tell it common sense too. Forget the evidence, it's commonsensical. So if it tells you a lot about the system. That's why I'm glad that this is actually coming out, because if it was a poor man, they'd probably already take his vehicle. He couldn't mobilize some people to block the GRA there, pay them some money to go there in your yard. And so I'm looking forward with great interest with what's going on.
Given your acceptance that some individuals in GRA might be compromised, what is your plan, future plans to ensure the eradication of corruption in GRA?
You know, sometimes in government you have to play a long game. You can't rush and do things based on the spur of the moment thought or something like that, you know, an instantaneous thought. So the day of reckoning for all of those who are committing illegal acts and compromising the revenue authority or the police force is coming. So I'm forewarning them too, so they know.
Dr. Jagdeo,
these things don't go unnoticed, and trust me, the information will come out from that camp itself, because they're not as unified as they think, and some people are sharing and singing like a swan now. Yeah, Well, not swan, like a nightingale, maybe I should say. Yeah, what's our whistle bird called? Toto or something like that. Yeah, they're singing like crazy, and not to us. I know where they're singing.
Dr. Jagdeo, recently there have been the two-show debacle. My question is, what role did, if any, your government play in having the two-show reject the visit by the Mohammeds? And what is your perception of the PNC coming out publicly and having the two-show retract his statement against a criminal entity that is sanctioned?
Well, the two shows can deny anyone entry into their villages. That's according to the act. You could get any individual, if you bring them down to Georgetown and give them something, you can get any individual to call for you to go into a village. So from all I gather, these two shows made it clear. You said the man is a philanthropist, but you didn't tell us about all of these criminal activities that he has been engaged in or accused of. And so we prefer you'd stay far from our people at this time. Now, that still holds. The two show from Anna, I gather, signed it, but then one of the two shows from a satellite village that is pro-PNC objected because should not have signed on behalf of all of the satellite villages. So that was the issue. But that's what I mentioned earlier, that the link between the PNC APA and their mobilization in the Anai area particularly. Remember, there was even a former minister from that Anai area, APNU minister, demonstrates clearly the links between the PNC and the Mohammeds. Yes.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo. Trevor Builder of Kaiser News. We had some delays with the GTE project, gas energy project. The maintenance cost, will it be implemented after the project is completed, or are they going to take it out? Because we know there's a delay. Are they going to start taking it out?
Yeah, maintenance on what?
They will operate and maintain and so forth.
No, so O&M contract only comes after the facility is completed. So you can, if it's not built as yet, you can't maintain what's not built, right? So O&M is a standard thing. So we put out a bid for O&M contract. I think the Siemens group is ranked number 1, and they are now negotiating with Siemens because it's Siemens equipment that's there. And Siemens is a big global firm to operate and maintain the plant for a period of 10 years. So all of the we wouldn't have to worry about O&M, right? And they get a fee for that. So that will happen when the plant is constructed. No. That is just that the contract will be signed upon handing over. Once the plant is commissioned, then the contract for the O&M will then be signed. But we're pleased that Siemens came in as ranked number 1 because it's their equipment that is being installed in the plant.
My second question.
And it's a big global firm.
I think the last time we asked about the second audit, finalization of the second audit, you said there was given a week extension by the ministry. Any updates so far on that process?
I keep saying that these audit things and stuff, you got to track it down with the ministry, not me. They 1 week, 2 weeks, 3-page documents and stuff. I don't deal with the small issues. I just deal with policy issues, like the law, like the Local Content Act, the new PSA. I deal with the big framework type issues, not who signed a letter one day or whether they met with the people from the secretariat and stuff. I don't do that. You have a minister doing that. I deal with policy, right? So please track those down with them about whether they signed it last week or this week.
All right. I think you had said back in 2023, I think there were some findings in one of the audits that said that Exxon will face consequences because they used money for operations in the Kaiser and Country block. Will the government still be pursuing suit?
Yeah. If they, first of all, it would be disallowed because those, right? So they can't be utilizing, our position still stands, they can't be utilizing money that goes towards the Stabroek Block Cost Bank for activities in the Kanji and Kaitro block. Those are two separate projects. Those projects would fall under the new PSC, which is a 10% royalty and all of the other 10% taxes, etc. Those projects fall under a different regime. Okay?
The consequences of this company?
Well, the consequences could be, well, first of all, they'd have to reimburse the money. So the first thing is that they would have to pay back the money to so it's a financial consequence basically. Not to lock them up, but a financial consequence. They'd have to pay back the money to the revenue pool of the Stabroek block.
You had said, my next question, you had said that the government will be pursuing or going to tender for independent meters at the FPSOs. What is the progress on this? Is government still... Independent
what?
Meters at the pump, so that we can monitor?
Yes, I don't know where we are now at this stage, but I think they have gone out, the ministry, to look at installing these own meters. Right now, we have the Bureau of Standards out there every day looking at the meters. We get a copy, a real-time dashboard, that what they see on oil production and everything else, produced water, emissions level, all of that. We have a dashboard in the ministry where we can monitor it real-time. The same thing that they see, we see. So then we also reconcile on the export figure. So if they submit one production figure and the export figure is different, we reconcile in that sense. But clearly we need to move forward on the routine monitoring, building our capacity. And once they move into the new building and their data center, we're gonna have a feed, a bigger feed, and then also we're thinking about an independent unit to do this.
My final question, to date, Exxon has already recovered 34 billion in costs, and this would cover Liza 1, Liza 2, Liza 3, all of this costs, which one would assume that is already paid off. So when those assets are paid off for, like when they take money to pay for these assets, who do they really belong to once the costs are recovered? Does it belong to Guyana or still to the oil company?
So the purchase of the assets, so first of all, the assets still belong to the company. They don't change ownership from the company. But so these assets are still working. So what happens is that if you pay off for the assets, then you have more money left now to distribute as profits. So now we will have more money to distribute as profit because we paid off of the assets, they're off of our books. So what happens is the government share of revenue skyrockets, which will happen in future years. So the assets ownership don't change. It's just the composition of the distribution or the share, the proportion of the revenue set aside for distribution to government and to the investor as profit, their share goes up. So for example, you only had 25% left 75% went to pay off back the assets, or to amortize the assets. 25% could have been distributed as dividends and or profit, or share of profit, and also the dividends, 2%. So it meant that we're getting 12.5%, 50-50, and then we're getting another 2% because of the 2% royalty, not dividend, royalty. So we're getting 14.5%, and they are getting 10.5%, right? Percent of gross revenue. So when you pay off the asset, right? Assuming you pay off everything, abstracting from the fact that you're doing new projects now, so you have to amortize new investment. So assuming we're not doing any new investment, then all of the future revenue now would be available for distribution as profit. Right? So our share, we'll get 50-50. So we will get 50% of the profit now in the future. Our 50% would be of a bigger pool. The same ratio will maintain 50%, but of a bigger pool of resources, and then plus 2%.
I have a follow-up to
Yeah,
this
go on.
question.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. With the assets paid off, we still see Exxon recovering costs for amortization and depreciation.
No, because the cost bank is not only 3 projects that are there now, but we have 6 projects that are going on. We dealt with this issue in the past. So you still have to keep amortizing those investments. So once all of the projects are amortized, that's why I'm saying if you're using a static analysis that say only these 3 projects, well then you've repaid all your costs. But in the meantime, you've expanded production by licensing or building 3 new FPSOs. So you have to pay for those 2, amortize those costs. That's what Norton didn't understand with the ring fencing. He wants to ring fence. He wants to ring fence if you paid off all the 3 projects. Then you don't need to ring fence anymore, because he didn't understand that. If you paid off, if you use a static analysis and you paid off for all 3 projects, then and you don't do any more exploration or anything else, then all of the money becomes available for distribution. You don't need to ring fence any further. I think he didn't understand what was being asked of him by the reporter.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo. Nirmal Ramswak, Sheriff News Network. One question. Given the recent controversy involving Mr. Mohammed and alleged false declarations to the Guyana Revenue Authority, can you say what steps the government is taking to ensure equitable enforcement of tax and custom laws, particularly when high-profile individuals are involved?
Oh, I dealt with that specific question earlier, that it seems as though some people, and the opposition is saying the same thing, you know, we basically, if that if you're wealthy, you can play the system. You can play the system. You can get preferential treatment, maybe from GRA or from the courts. It seems as though that is what people find reprehensible. And the GRA has to ensure, the head of GRA, the commissioner, has to ensure that he deals with the matter in the same manner as he would if a poor person encountered similar difficulties. And particularly given the magnitude of the evaded taxes, he should even be paying more attention to this matter, because hardly anyone would be evading $50 million of taxes, and with evidence supplied from the United States of America. The US ambassador said they had a mountain load of evidence. It seems as though people don't want to listen to that, because they listen. You notice the diversionary tactic all the time. When the country asks one question, they speak about something else. And I think the little going to these communities and handing over a motorcycle here or an engine there is to divert attention from answering all of the questions associated with the criminality of the Mohammeds. Nobody has asked them about the torture of those 3 individuals as reported by the Starbuck News. We've gone quiet on that. You let somebody else try to run for government or office or even philanthropy with a track record like that. And where his father apologized for him because he tortured, broke people's ribs, put salt in their mouth. And look at the report in the Starbuck News, torture them. You think anybody else would have avoided this question? Nobody asked it because the PNC media is busy covering it all up and the influencers who are being paid. Well, one of them, Primus, sees the consequences of doing this now. Yes.
Hi, good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo. Shania Willis from Kaiser News. Sir, you said a month ago that the final report of the second audit should be made public. Could you say...
Oh, go back to that audit thing. You heard my question. I'm sorry. I don't want to cut you short, but the audit business, please go and call Vikram Bharrat or GRA. It's like I can't follow up on routine things, you know.
Good afternoon, Jarrah Ryan, Guyana Times. I have 3 different sets of questions.
Yes, sure.
What are your comments on the most recent attacks on the GDF ranks patrol in Cayuni? Have you been briefed or any casualties observed on the other side? And if appropriate action isn't taken by Venezuela, is Venezuela going to be held accountable for or responsible for attacks by non-state actors? My second set of questions. This afternoon, the affidavit that the GRA submitted to the High Court for the showing the correct purchase price for the Lamborghini, it was thrown out. Your reaction to this? And
oh, really? It was thrown out?
Yeah, and final set of questions. The principals of Frontera, CGX's partners, recently made comments during a first quarter earnings call, basically threatening legal action if they don't get back their quarantine block. So how is the government treating, their quarantine license? So how is the government treating with this matter?
So if they take legal action, we would vigorously defend the legal action. And I think we should release all the documents, the letters we wrote to them, so that their shareholders would see what we sent to them. I'm not so sure. This is a publicly traded company, and the shareholders have a right to see the correspondence from our side to the executives of this company. We have a ton of other issues that we have about issues of inflated costs, etc., but I guess that would be best addressed. That should we need to do so through an affidavit if they pursue legal action. I did not know the affidavit or the supplemental affidavit was thrown out, but well, this is a shock to me because you have to have, I don't know what reasoning could be given by a judge to throw out an affidavit where we get this information from the U.S. government. I'll address it. I don't know what the circumstances are as yet. I'll address it later. But I spoke earlier about this, something similar. I'll address it later. And on the GDF matter, I think the GDF, the Chief of Staff, I spoke with him earlier today. At 5 p.m. today, he has a press conference. So he will be addressing those matters directly. Yes, he will address the matters comprehensively.
Dr. Jagdeo, good afternoon. Shaquan Gill, DPI. Two questions. Firstly, on the Adriana Young case, do you consider it necessary at this juncture for the invitation of an external agency like the FBI to overtake or oversee this investigation, considering the fact that government has already secured the services?
The president has spoken about this already. We're not going to be part of a charade. The government of Guyana has bent over backwards to meet the requests of the family and many people. But right now, and the public, we allowed their own pathologists to come in. We brought in 2 other international pathologists. The family lawyer witnessed the autopsy. Their own doctor of their choosing, witnessed the autopsy. The results came out, the results were quite clear. They tried to cast doubt on opposition people, including making up fake stories about the autopsy, like what the nurse aid, etc. They've been doing this all the time. That's the second thing. We promised a full investigation. The police spoke about this, exploring every theory. We brought in a specialist from Canada. When does it end? And I bet you if they get a result again that they're not happy with, including FBI, they would not accept it. It's a political issue. We've gone overboard on this matter than we've done almost on any other matters. You know, you have several other issues or instances where people had called for external pathologists, etc. Never in a single case that I know of have we brought in 3 internationally renowned pathologists to look at this because of the circumstances. All of the rumors they dealt with, they addressed every concern. They changed their lawyer when they didn't get the results, and he spoke about the professional nature of the forensic audit. They brought in a PNC lawyer, Todd or something like that. I forgot his name. And they started criticizing their own doctor. Every question was addressed that was posed there. Did this child, did they find sexual assault? All of the questions. What happened? Was there cotton wool in the nose? But do you think you would be able, Irfanali would never be able, as someone said, I think there's a cartoon in the newspaper, it's only if the PPP is gone, then they would be satisfied. The PPP out of government, that is then they would be satisfied with the results of the investigation. It's a political issue now. Look at what Norton said. He is convening at the Square of the Revolution a program for justice for Adriana and talking about the stolen mandate or rigged elections by PPP. If this is it. So Irfanali will never be able to satisfy this political answer that they want. So they can divide our people along ethnic lines they think again.
Yeah. And finally, on more of an election matter, we saw recently that GCOM received some support from multilateral institutions and so on. How do you consider this playing a role in ensuring that electoral processes here are strengthened? And what is the confidence of you and your party in election 2025 considering this?
We're happy with the external help. I've seen, I think the manuals have been sent to the political parties now. Detailed manuals that are part of the new Representation of People Act. I hope that they would soon share the manuals with the media so that it would leave no doubt as to the role and responsibilities of all the actors. in the electoral process. And it is that approach that we want. Remember, the last elections, the manual was in Lowenfield's head. So every minute he could change. You remember the East Coast, when those boxes, 42 boxes on the East Coast, they couldn't find the document in the boxes when they told the people, bring them in paper bags to the GCOM building. And then claim, oh, the PP stole those documents too. And luckily they had some video showing the presiding officers going into GCOM, the Region 4 office with the documents, lying all the time. That would not happen again. And always this controversy as to the role and the responsibilities of polling agents and what document belongs to them, like the tally sheets, etc. All of those are clarified in the So this approach is a really good one to build confidence. So you can be equipped now with your own manual when you go, and if a presiding officer says something else to you, say, look, this is the official document of GCOM. You can't tell me otherwise. This is the document that's stamped. These are my rights and responsibilities. So I just feel it's good. We're looking to cooperate. APNU doesn't seem to want to cooperate. They're still with the commission, but that's their business. They would never, as my Paul said, they will, if they win the elections on this voters list, they will accept the results. But if they don't win it, they can't accept the results. That sums it all up for you, my Paul. Thank you. Thank you.